Today, we're diving into one of the most important partnerships in history, the alliance between the American colonists and France during the Revolutionary War. It's an incredible story about how a struggling rebellion found a powerful friend that helped change the world. So let's get right into it.
I mean, just think about it for a second. How on earth did a brand new, totally outmatched army of colonists manage to win a war against the British Empire? We're talking about the biggest, baddest global superpower of the day. Well, the answer, a huge part of it, is found across the Atlantic Ocean. To really wrap your head around why the Americans needed help so badly, you first have to see just how lopsided this fight really was. I mean, it was a total David versus Goliath situation, no question about it.
So on one side, you've got the Continental Army. They were poorly supplied, often didn't get paid, and had zero navy to speak of. And on the other side, the British Empire. They had the most powerful navy on the planet, a professional, highly trained army, and what seemed like an endless supply of money. Yeah, the odds were not looking good for America. And let's get really specific here. The Continental Army was desperate for the absolute basics. They needed money just to pay their soldiers and buy things like food and uniforms. They didn't have enough modern weapons, and, this is a big one, they were always short on gunpowder. You know, without gunpowder, a musket is basically just a very expensive club. And with no navy, they just couldn't stop the British from controlling the entire coastline.
Okay, so the Americans are in a really tough spot. Who could they possibly turn to for help? Well, how about Britain's biggest rival, France? For the French government, the American Revolution looked like the perfect chance to weaken the British Empire, especially after losing to them in some earlier wars. And that leads us to this really important idea, an alliance. This wasn't just some casual, informal help. No, this was an official, signed on the dotted line partnership where both countries agreed to fight together for the same goal. And that formal agreement, it was going to change everything. Now, one of the first and most passionate supporters from France was the Marquis de Lafayette. And you got to hear this. He was only 19 years old when he sailed to America to volunteer. He didn't even ask to be paid. He quickly became a brilliant commander and one of General George Washington's most trusted friends. He was a true inspiration. After Lafayette showed up, things really started to pick up speed. In 1778, the Treaty of Alliance was signed. That made it official. France was in the war. Then, in 1780, a huge boost arrived. An experienced general named Rochambeau, and with him, thousands of highly trained professional French soldiers. You could feel it. The whole game was about to change. All right, so the alliance is official, but what did that French help actually look like on the ground? Well, it came in a bunch of different forms, and honestly, every single one of them was an absolute game changer for the American cause. France sent over a ton of stuff. Money, military supplies, trained soldiers, and of course their powerful navy. But they also brought something that's maybe less obvious but was just as important, expert knowledge, especially when it came to military engineering. Let's start with the money and supplies. France provided huge loans and straight-up gifts that literally kept the American war effort from going bankrupt. They also shipped over all the essential gear the Americans couldn't make enough of themselves, like tons of gunpowder and thousands of modern muskets and cannons. This support was the lifeline that kept the revolution alive. And this is where that expert knowledge I mentioned really came into play. French military engineers were masters at building fortifications. Okay, so what are those? Just think of them as super strong defensive walls and structures designed to hold up against a massive attack. They taught the Americans how to build these things effectively, which saved countless lives and helped them hold critical positions. But you know, maybe the single biggest difference maker was the French Navy. For the very first time in the war, the British Royal Navy, the undisputed champion of the seas, was being seriously challenged off the American coast. French warships smashed through the British blockade, which meant precious supplies could finally get into the colonies. It gave the Americans a real fighting chance at sea. So now we get to see how it all came together. All of this support, the soldiers, the ships, the strategy, it all led to one final decisive moment, the Siege of Yorktown. This was the ultimate showcase of the alliance working in perfect harmony. But hey, before the big land battle could even start, a critical fight had to be won at sea. The French fleet, led by Admiral de Grasse, met the British Navy right at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. And guess what? The French won. This naval victory was everything. It meant the British Army on the land was now completely, utterly trapped. There was no escape. So here's exactly how the trap worked. Washington and Rochambeau marched their combined American and French armies hundreds of miles south to surround the British at Yorktown. At the same time, the French fleet blocked any escape by sea. Then the siege began. Cannons pounded the British defenses day and night, and it was often the French soldiers who led the most dangerous attacks to capture key British positions. It was just a perfectly executed plan. Trapped by land and sea, the British Army had absolutely nowhere to go. Their surrender wouldn't just end the battle, it would effectively end the entire war and signal the birth of a brand new nation. You know, there's this incredible detail. As the British soldiers were laying down their weapons, their own bands were supposedly playing a song called "The World Turned Upside Down." I mean, could there be a more perfect song for that moment? A colonial rebellion, with the help of its powerful friend, had just defeated a global empire. And the numbers here just tell the whole story. On October 19th, 1781, more than 7,000 British soldiers surrendered. It was a massive, undeniable victory for the Franco-American alliance. This was the moment the war was truly won. A couple of years later, the Treaty of Paris made everything official. Great Britain formally recognized the United States as an independent country. America gained a huge amount of new territory, all the way to the Mississippi River. And for France, well, their big goal was achieved. They had successfully weakened their greatest rival. The impact of this alliance is still with us today. It forged a friendship between the United States and France that has lasted for centuries, and it stands as one of history's greatest examples of how nations working together can achieve the impossible. Let's be real, without French help, the world map might look very different right now. And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. Seeing how this single partnership completely reshaped history, it really makes you wonder, what's the most important alliance in the world today, and how might it be shaping our future as we speak?